What I'd like to think about this morning is what it means to have a flipped classroom. That certainly is the buzzword, and maybe like you, I was attracted to it a few years ago because it seemed like it would solve two problems that I have in my teaching. Number one, my students aren't coming to class prepared. I think that's something many of us have talked about, many of us share. How could I help my students come to class more prepared? And if they do come to class more prepared, then what do I do with them? We've heard in this conference a large number of great ideas of active learning things, but I felt I lacked the classroom management to make those active learning techniques work as well as they might. So the flipped classroom was going to help students be prepared and help me be more effective as a teacher with better classroom management. How was I going to do that? Well, what I called on first was my intuition. Something that's it's actually embarrassing to think about. What I did was what felt right. But imagine if you went to your doctor and your doctor said, I've got a new therapy for you. I think it's going to work. How would you feel? You want your doctor not to have done the original research, but to be familiar with the literature. And that's really what we all do as scholars. I do some work on the minimum wage, and I wouldn't even think about writing or developing any kind of new ideas without having read the literature. But here I was thinking about the flipped classroom without realizing, hey, there's people who've been there before. And what I want to talk about in the few minutes that I have of what I think are some of the highlights of team-based learning. And for me, the takeaway is I come to these conferences, I learn a lot of new ideas for teaching, I try them. The ones that really count are the ones that stick. And team-based learning for me is now one that I use repeatedly semester after semester, suggesting that it really is effective in solving those two problems that I had, getting my students to do work before class and helping with classroom management. What I want to focus on are two main takeaways, two things that have been most effective, I think, in improving my teaching from team-based learning. And the first was, how do I help my students get prepared for class? My intuition had been to give students a pop quiz when they come to class. Beginning class, okay, prove to me you've done the reading. And you might be able to guess how that went. Started off with class on a real down point, very desultory. Many students felt, I failed once again. Good students said, well, I did okay, but I missed some. It started off class with a real drag. What team-based learning gave me was an alternative strategy that helped class start more on an upbeat. And what it involves is something called a readiness assurance test. Very simply, what I ask my students to do before class is to do a very simple multiple choice test on core concepts, things that are very low level in Bloom's taxonomy. They do that individually. And then they come to class and they take exactly the same test, same multiple choice test in a team using these, what I call scratch-offs. Students are talking about economics. They're talking about economics in an excited way. They're talking about it in a positive way. There's something about these scratch-off forms that students find very appealing. They tell me, why don't you use these before? Why don't all teachers use this? I think it's something, it sort of reminds them of a lottery ticket. They're really attracted to this idea. But it also works very well in terms of what we know about learning theory. I gave you a very simple question. It was one I hope most people got right. I just had actually told you the answer a few seconds before. But learning theory suggests that's the best way to improve our memory. The other thing learning theory suggests is that we need immediate feedback. And of course, these scratch-off forms give immediate feedback. Typically, students working in teams get 80–90% right, which means students are really ready to go in class. These are low-level questions, but everybody is ready. Everybody is operating now on the same higher level. Everybody feels good about themselves, and we're ready to move on to more exciting things in class. So these simple scratch-off forms have solved for me the problem of helping students get ready for class. The individual assessment means they're more likely to have done the reading. The team assessment means that after 5 to 10 minutes of class, everybody's ready to go with a more exciting, interactive activity. Well, that leads me to the second thing that I wanted to work on in my teaching, and that was how to make these activities that I do in class have better classroom management. So let's talk a little bit about how teams are formed. These are teams that last throughout the entire semester. They need to be relatively small. I find the magic number is 4. Spencer Kagan, who's a cooperative learning, I think the best expert in the country, argues that 4 is a magic number. It's large enough to have diversity of opinion, but small enough that everybody can contribute. And 4 also has the magic quality of allowing pair work to be done in many different ways. If you think about it, with a group of 4, there's automatically 3 sets of 2 that can work together. Pair work is probably the easiest thing to introduce in the classroom. The second thing is that these groups need to be instructor-created. I ask you to form groups. I was very direct about that. I made people move around. That was really driven home to me a little while ago when I went to a conference with my wife. And it was an interactive session. We were asked to form small groups. I looked over at my wife and knew, it's not a good idea if we go to the same group. We talk to each other all the time anyway. We're going to have all sorts of subtext going on. We need to be in different groups. What the leader said was, please turn to somebody you don't know. And I realized how appreciative I was of that, because I wouldn't be insulting my wife, to turn the other way and move to a different group. And I realized we need to do the same thing with our students, is they need permission not to work with friends, not to work with people who speak the same language or come from the same cultural or educational background. And so by being very directive and having the instructor set the group, it avoids those kind of problems. Team-based literature recommends that the activity itself be well structured. My friend Jim Cooper, who's another cooperative learning guru, says there's only 3 secrets for doing group work in class. 3 secrets are structure, structure, and structure. If possible, the activity itself should require people to work together. It shouldn't allow one person to dominate and decide the answer, nor should it allow individuals to go off, each do their own work, and then come back together only at the end. And the activity itself can foster interdependence between students. But again, the assessment needs to be individual. We need to hold our students individually accountable. Group grades are really the bane and the reason many students don't like group work. We need to hold students individually accountable in some way after they do their group work. So these are the basic recommendations that TBL gives for group work. For what they call the application exercises, that's their name for the activities that we do in class, they have 4 S's. The problem should be significant. Now, the fact that the students have now done an individual assessment and a team assessment means that students in my class are now familiar with the basic vocabulary, the basic concepts. They're ready to move on to a more significant problem. I don't have to waste time in class doing things that students can very well do on their own. TBL recommends that we give the entire group the same problem and that students give their response at the same time. But for me, what's really changed my teaching is the 4th S. That is requiring a specific choice. Now, I'm not a great fan of multiple choice, but I realize that TBL is onto something. If in group work we require a specific choice, and by that I mean A, B, C, D, or E, it focuses the group. It doesn't allow groups to go off in different directions. It means they have a tangible decision they need to make at the end of their group work. It also means that groups have something to talk to one another about. What happens too often in group work is one group reports one thing, another group reports another idea, and there's no connections between the two. Let me show you this with a specific example. This is an application exercise that I've written called the tax game. It's a simulation in which teams have to decide on a tax system for the country. Remember, they've done the individual work, so students now know what a regressive tax is, what a progressive tax is, how the tax incidence works. Now they need to decide on a tax system for the country, and they get reported out the total tax incidence and the Gini coefficient. I just want to focus on one very short activity. In this simulation, students need to decide on the excise tax. And let's just focus on the first one there, the tobacco tax. And let's do it through specific choice. Excise taxes on a pack of cigarettes should be $0, $2, $4, $6, or $8. Imagine students have worked on this for a few minutes. On the count of 3, I'm going to ask 2 different groups to show me their answers. Instead of groups operating through me, mediating everything, now the groups have something to say to one another. They have a reason to argue. Why did I choose $2? Why did I choose $8? The specific choice means that now the dynamic in the group discussion and reporting out is much more effective than the old way that I used to try to do that. This is, I think, one of two really top economic education conferences that take place in the country. The second is the one sponsored by the American Economic Association, its Committee on Economic Education. I hope everyone here is familiar with CTRE. That stands for the Conference on Teaching and Research in Economic Education, which takes place just after Memorial Day every year. Last year, we formed a study group at CTRE to look at team-based learning. And I invite you to join our listserv. We also are creating an archive of application exercises for the principles course, and I invite you to both participate in that, upload your own application exercises, and join our discussion. We'll be meeting again. CTRE is meeting in Atlanta. I believe it's June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And I hope I'll see you in Atlanta. I hope I'll see you online in the TBL online discussion. And we can further what I think is a really remarkable contribution to the flipped classroom. TBL was there first. Let's follow the lead from other disciplines. Thank you.